And I went back to my room, and what I began to realize was that the question he was asking me, who do you think you are, is the question, the answer to which sets up what your life will be like. See, this is the single question, and depending on how you answer it, sets up the game. When the great teacher said, know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. You've heard that before, yes? What was the freedom he was talking about? See, religious science is based on freedom. Ernest talks about freedom all the time. But what is this freedom that comes with knowing the truth? Is this freedom the freedom to face the reality of disappointment with courage? Is this freedom that we talk about here on Sunday morning the freedom to have the wisdom to accept the things that you cannot change? Is that the freedom they're talking about? See, this is what the psychiatrist said. If you looked at your past, if you look at your stuff, there are limitations. And you need to gather enough wisdom to accept your limitations. And when I stood there without any data and said, no, I can create anything I want, he said, who do you think you are? What is that freedom that we talk about here on Sunday morning? Is it the freedom to fight the good fight? Or is the freedom we talk about here on Sunday morning the freedom to have exactly the life you want, your way, when you want it? Is that freedom we talk about the freedom to be able to create any reality we want? Of course, if you say things like that, people are going to say, who do you think you are? This is not some academic discussion. Julie and I were in Florida several months ago, and we planned to spend an extra 4 days in this town where she lived for like 10 years. And that's where she really got involved in Unity Church. Julie's been involved in metaphysics at the Unity Church, you know, for like almost 30 years now. And one of her dear friends she met there at that church. And for like 10 years they were in that church together, and this friend went through the board, you know, and was president a couple of times, went to classes, you know, on metaphysics and how to use it, went back to Unity Village. They even attended some science of mind classes that were there because they appreciated the way sometimes Judy says she thinks sometimes that science of mind teaches how to use law a little cleaner than some of the other teachers. And so here was this good friend of her who's been in metaphysics now for 18 years, absolutely been immersed in it, read every book you and I have read kind of thing. And she's had this tremendous health challenge for the last 3 years. And so as long as we were going there, we decided to take 4 days and go down there and help her be rid of it. And I'm not quite as good yet as saying, pick up your bed and walk, but it's getting close. So we went down, and she said, listen, I'm coming to your work. We were going to speak in Tallahassee, and she lived in Pensacola. It's about a 4-hour drive. And so she was going to drive to this workshop, that we're, you know, because she had heard about it. She was telling her, that's the most transforming workshop kind of thing. You wouldn't believe what happens. And anyway, so she says, I'm going to drive there Monday night, then drive home and work Tuesday, and then drive up and drive back. You know, so she's talking 16 hours of driving. And she has a lot of physical pain. So I said, listen, you don't have to do that. Why don't we just spend a couple hours now? We'll just use some of these techniques, you know, and go get rid of this thing. And so she said, okay. So we sat down, we set a time, and we sat down, we started chatting. After about 15 minutes, it became real obvious to me how she would answer that question. So I said to her, I said, listen, and she knows my history, you know, I'm perfectly healthy after 30 surgeries, no limitations, no pain, none of that stuff. And so I looked at her and I said, listen, do you think you're ever going to be rid of this problem? Do you think you're ever going to be totally rid of it? It'll be gone. And I was smiling. And she looked at me and she says, oh, Terry, you don't know what it's like to be a breast implant survivor, do you? And I said, no. She says, you've never read any books about it, have you? And I said, no. She says, you've never attended any support groups about how we support each other and bring breast implant survivors, have you? And I said, no, I haven't. She said, well, let me tell you about it. And so she began to tell me what it was like to be a breast implant survivor. And as she began to speak, I began to weep inside. See, she had all these glorious tools that she had learned about how to use the power of God. But when you went and asked her, so who do you think you are? She would say, I'm a breast implant survivor. And because of that declaration, then, she could go use these glorious tools to survive better. She could not use the glorious tools to eliminate the problem, just be done with it, have it be gone. I mean, after all, who do you think I am? And that's where you and I are today. We come here Sunday morning, we do our classworks here, we associate with people here, and it talks about all things are possible if you believe you are. We sit here and we light candles and talk about the power of God's my power. But when we go out into the universe, we are absolutely bombarded with the idea that you and I are diseased. Oh, they don't say it like that. They don't come up and say you're sick. What they do, but I'll tell you, as I travel around, I think some of the great metaphysicians I meet ought to paste Velcro on the back of their hand and on their forehead. Then, so when you walk up and say, so how are things going? They throw their hand up with a stick. Oh God, I'm having wonderful opportunities for growth. Children that just walked out of here, can you imagine sitting them up here on the stage and walking up to them and saying, listen, we want you to know that your life is about having wonderful opportunities for growth. We may not tell them things like, oh, this is a dark planet, and if you really had your act together, you wouldn't even be here. I mean, we're not that blatant. We're not even as blatant as walking up to them and say, you know that you're here to work off your karmic debt. Don't work it off properly, then you'll have to come back and work off even more. See, we've thrown the God out that used to have a big general ledger in the sky keeping check marks, and guess who keeps check marks now? You and I. We're the most advanced generation that's ever been on this planet. Finally, you and I stand together as women and men, equals, sisters and brothers. And that doesn't mean that each of us might not bring some residue with us based on some old programming. I mean, I don't react the same when a powerful woman pokes me in the chest and tells me what to do as when a powerful man does that. I'm sure it has nothing to do with having a fairly smothering mother. I'm not saying I don't have some sucks about it, but there is nothing legitimate. Any kind of prejudice or bigotry is not legitimate within me anymore. We finally understand that if it doesn't work for them over there, wherever them are, then it's not working for me. We begin to understand that we are family. This species called humanity. We're all in this together. And that this wonderful planet is a living planet. We need to take care of it. We're the most advanced generation that's ever been on this planet. And we have more labels today about our sickness and disease than we ever have before. You walk up to people and you say, or you don't just say, who do you think you are, but you ask them. Just watch their language. They're the adult children of alcoholic parents. They're a product of a dysfunctional family. They're terribly codependent. They're this, they're that. The old model that you and I grew up in was a model of using these glorious tools to go deal with our stuff better. We could go use these glorious tools of choice to overcome our bad habits, to deal with our addictions. We could go use these glorious tools to deal with my stuff and stay centered. I could go use these glorious tools to fight the good fight and have courage in the face of insurmountable obstacles. We walk around and we sing songs like The Impossible Dream. That the world will be better by far. That one man or one woman, all covered with scars, would strive to lash out the courage to reach the unreachable stars. And we legitimize that stuff. And that song does not speak to your absolute power. It speaks to the same game that's been around for thousands of years. And that is that the human condition of us is in bondage to the flesh. And it absolutely speaks to separation and duality. Not as much as saying, you have a devil within you. We don't believe that anymore. Now we have a small self, or a saboteur, or an ego. And it's the same mind.